When I was a child, I was very interested in history. I would sit down on the television and watch the History Channel back when it was really good. My favorite events in history were World War One and World War Two. I always got a kick out of the movies that they made for different battle scenes. So there's the Battle of the Bulge with Robert Shaw and all the other great actors, 1965 film, and then there was Tora Tora and all these great films. And then when I got a little older as a kid, perhaps I was 10, 11 years old, my mom came to me and said, you need to learn Black history. And I thought, okay, I don't know what you mean by that. Yeah, I guess I'll look into it. And when Black History Month came, I would watch the History Channel, and they were showing me all the things that were going on in the civil rights movement. And I learned a great deal about Martin Luther King in a favorable light. I learned a great deal about Malcolm X in an unfavorable light. But I looked deeper into that. I went into Roots, saw that film, and then I saw Roots: The Next Generation, and I saw an immense amount of suffering that Black people had to incur from white domination. And the constant thought when I was diving into Black history as a child was that it seems like Black people have just been suffering under white domination for years, hundreds of years. I'm just thinking, why are we here? Why are we here? Okay. Why didn't we do what he did? Okay. There was religious persecution in England, right? This is around the time when they were finally allowing Protestantism to flourish, but then there was different persecutions among the Protestants themselves. And so the Puritans said, we had enough. We're going to leave. We're going to go to the New World. And they created a new country, essentially, right? They had the initiative to vote on their feet and say, If you can't give me what I desire, I'm going to do it myself." And I was thinking, why can't Black people do the same thing? And so I asked many people in my family. They wouldn't give me a sufficient answer. They would say, "Oh, we have to fight for our rights and freedom." I says, "Yeah, but we can fight for our rights and freedom by doing it ourselves. We don't have to ask people to do it for us. I mean, what sense is that, you know?" And again, no sufficient answer whatsoever. And all throughout my teenage years and all throughout my 20s, I've had that nagging question in my head. If it's so bad in America and Europe, why would Black people stay? And the answer that I now believe is because it isn't that bad. It's that Black people have it very good in America and Europe, and Black people would not survive and thrive on their own without white people assisting them and really just directing them. And so, therefore, the idea of going back to Africa is totally out of the question, and it will never happen. And so, with that, I kept exploring, if that's the case, why on earth are Black people making such a commotion about what white people have done to them over these last two, three, 400 years? Why? If you want to stay here because you have it pretty good here, wouldn't you want to work along with white people to make it better? And now I'm coming to the point where I just think that Black people have a low self esteem, period. They haven't developed beyond the stage that they were in when they first came into the United States as slaves. They haven't developed beyond that. They still see white people as superior to them. And they're jealous of white people and they're envious of white people, particularly the white man. And they want to bring the white man down to their level so that they can feel better about themselves because they have a giant ego and they have lots and lots of pride. They talk about all the things that Black people supposedly have done and all the things that white people haven't done. And that to me is a recipe for disaster. And it's very, very troubling. Now, I read a whole lot of history, and I can tell you that most groups, all groups really, have had the stage of development that Black people were in the 15, 1600s. When you go back to the ancient times of Aristotle, Plato, Livy, all these great men, all these great historian, philosophers, thinkers, they all deemed the European, the Galilean, the Celt, they were living in the European continent as totally backward. Yes, they were very spirited, very warrior like, but they had no idea how to civilize themselves. And so they were just pretty much a bunch of people that would rape and pillage villages all across the land. And so they were not looked upon in a great light. But what did that European do? They acclimated to Greco Roman culture and Christianity. And over the years, they civilized themselves because they admitted to themselves that they are not where they need to be. They were humble. You can say the same thing about Japan, the Meiji Restoration in the 1860s. They finally figured out the Europeans are ahead of us because they have certain advantages that we can gain if we change. So the shogunate had to go. The Meiji Restoration came, the emperor came in, and they changed. And by 40 years, they were pretty much knocking on the door of Western Europe. China did the same thing under Deng Xiaoping in the late 70s. Said, we're behind. Mao's reforms didn't work. We need to do something different. And he opened up China. The point is that you have to look at yourself and be honest. We are behind and we have to make a change. We shouldn't lie to ourselves and others about who we supposedly are, because that won't get us anywhere. Because I guarantee you, there are two outcomes to Black people, two outcomes in history. If they continue going down this road where they're not going to analyze themselves, not going to change, you're either going to be conquered by someone else or you will perish. You will not exist in 100, 200 years the way you're going. There's been lots and lots of empires, lots and lots of cultures that are no longer here. Why is that? Because they couldn't adapt to the times. They couldn't grow. They were stagnant. They were backward. They were prideful, and it led to their destruction. And that is where Black people are headed if they're not careful. And so this whole idea of going back to Africa has to go away. We want to stay here in America and we want to be Americans. Okay. You have to look at Black culture, African culture is backward, a culture that you have to stay far, far away from. You should have no pride in that culture. It is comparable to living amongst cavemen or hunter gatherers. That's essentially what it is. It's a hunter gatherer society. These people are a Stone Age people. And you try to acclimate them to a modern world, it's not going to work. If you want to grow, you have to learn how to die. You learn how to die by looking at yourself and saying, I am not where I want to be. I am not where I should be. I have to make changes in order for me to survive and thrive. So the Black man, Black people have to put down their pride, have to be humble and say, we must change and we need help. And once you do that, the help will come and then you'll grow. And that is essentially why we are starting this culture, because it needs to happen and it will happen. This culture is not going to happen overnight. Obviously, we're taking our time, but that is the plan. Going back to Africa has to go away. Staying here, making ourselves better has to be the plan. And so that's what we need to do.